Unfortunately, war is still rustling my jimmies this week, but not the same war as the last episode. What's in the news with stories on internet information seizures, gun rights, more Silk Road trial corruption, a judge who says a man can't sleep with his wife consensually, bad cops, and digital camera searches. Finally, the Next Generation segment on schools teaching conformity over education. This episode is brought to you by Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom, helping you to become a smarter and more informed libertarian than ever before for just 24 cents a day.
Welcome to The Lava Flow, channeling the flow of information to the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, voluntarist, and agorist community. Find us at thelavaflow.com. Here's your host, Roger Paxton.
Thank you for joining me this week. Coming to you from the state that is the home of the first ever widely publicized supposed case of an alien abduction. In 1961, the Hill family reported being abducted by extraterrestrials and taken into a UFO. This is the show that will bring you the people, places, and events that everyone in the Liberty Revolution needs to know. You can catch me on Twitter at the Lava Flow Pod. This is episode 69, War Part 2. And it's Tuesday, August 29th, 2017, when there have already been more than 800 people killed by police this year. What's rustling my jimmies this week? You're about to find out. Let's do it to it. Last week, war was rustling my jimmies, but it was the impending war with North Korea at the time. I was very concerned, as were many other people, that the rhetoric on both sides was reaching levels never before seen and that we were headed to an all-out war. Thankfully, Jong Un blinked. Conservatives are calling it a victory for Trump and that he stood up to Kim and didn't back down, instead causing Kim to back down. Of course, the truth is a bit more nuanced than that, with China saying that they would not back a first strike by North Korea being a huge factor in North Korea backing down. But I'm confident that Trump wanted war, and I would be willing to bet that he was pissed off when Kim blinked, because within days of Kim backing down, Trump has laid out his plan to send even more troops to Afghanistan. Yeah, this is just what we need, expanding the longest war in American history with more troops. Before long, Trump will be sending troops in Afghanistan that weren't even alive when the war began. Let that sink in for a minute. Trump laid out a plan that included 5 key pieces to it. The first piece is troop levels. Trump has given the Pentagon the authority to ramp up troop levels in Afghanistan by several thousand. The U.S. currently has about 8,400 troops in Afghanistan, and U.S. military generals have said that a few thousand more troops would help the U.S. break the current stalemate against the Taliban. In 2010, we had over 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. Did that win the war? Did that break the current stalemate against the Taliban? Of course not, and neither will this few thousand troops. The second piece of Trump's plan is to give the military more autonomy to attack the Taliban and other terrorist groups in the country. The Obama administration placed restrictions on U.S. offensive operations in Afghanistan after the Afghan forces took the lead on fighting the Taliban, a move that frequently frustrated commanders in the field. So Trump is giving the war makers exactly what they want. The third piece of Trump's plan is to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table to find a political solution to the Afghan war. You know, the Taliban, the folks who offered us bin Laden on a silver platter before the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan after the September 11th attacks. Yes, that Taliban did offer to send bin Laden to any country of our choosing, even Canada or anywhere else, where he could have immediately been extradited to the U.S. to face trial after the September 11th attacks. Instead, Bush wanted to end the Taliban, who had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11, so the Taliban was told, too bad. There did not ever have to be this war to begin with. If you're surprised by that claim that the Taliban offered up bin Laden to the U.S., I suggest you find out the truth about the Afghanistan war from Scott Horton, host of the Scott Horton podcast and the writer of the new book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. You can get it in paperback or Kindle format from Amazon. There's a link in the show notes that is an affiliate link for me with Amazon if you're interested in buying this book, and I highly recommend it. I just finished this book a couple of days ago, and it was just full of great information that you need to know about this war, especially in light of Trump escalating the war. The fourth piece of Trump's plan is he threatened to cut off U.S. aid to Pakistan to persuade them to help fight terrorism in Afghanistan. Trump has even said that India, a nuclear rival of Pakistan, could contribute to the Afghan war effort. See what I mean? Trump wasn't satisfied with not having a full-on nuclear war with North Korea. Now he's playing with more fire by trying to force India into the Afghanistan war effort, which Pakistan will not take lightly. That's just what we need, putting two nuclear-capable enemies at odds with each other and making them hate each other even more. Trump is a complete and utter fucking moron. The last part of Trump's plan involved winning, but not nation building. We've heard this same bullshit from Bush and Obama, and we're still there dictating to the Afghan people how things happen there, and we're running the country with our puppet politicians. I don't see this changing a bit. As a matter of fact, there's very little in this new plan that's actually new. It's the same plan that his predecessors have had and failed with over and over. And Trump will fail just as well. Just like the USSR did in the 80s. Even the Russians were smart enough to get the hell out of Afghanistan after 10 years. Our rulers apparently haven't figured it out yet. But there's a reason that they haven't figured it out. Afghanistan is rich in everything from iron ore to copper and zinc to precious gems like lapis lazuli, emeralds and rubies, and even rare earth minerals that we need like lithium. Isn't that worth it, though? Bullshit. As Scott Horton said in Fool's Errand, bin Laden has won. Bin Laden stated over and over that his goal was to draw the U.S. into a long war in the Middle East and make it similar to our Vietnam, where we wasted men and resources. That was the reason for September the 11th. The Afghanistan and Iraq wars have created more terrorists and terrorist sympathizers than bin Laden could have created in 3 lifetimes. We have our new Vietnam War, and we have spent over $714 billion in Afghanistan alone and lost nearly 2,000 young men and women. Not to mention the deaths of nearly 30,000 civilians in Afghanistan due to our invasion. Bin Laden got exactly what he wanted from the September 11th, 2001 attacks. And the U.S. keeps handing it to him, even in death, on a silver platter. As is the case in almost all wars,
strange game. The only winning move is not to play.
Have you subscribed to the Lava Flow on iTunes or any mobile device yet? Then what's wrong with you? Go to thelavaflow.com/subscribe so you don't miss a minute of the show. And while you're subscribing, make sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review the show to help others find our podcast. thelavaflow.com/subscribe.
Fuck. The Johnny Rocket Launchpad is liberty. Each week we strive to bring you the best guests in talk radio. The Johnny Rocket Launchpad delivers weekly interviews of noteworthy politicians, experts, and activists. The Johnny Rocket Launchpad is bringing the party to the Libertarian Party and launching ideas in your direction. Check us out at johnnyrocketlaunchpad.com. You can hear me, Kurt Nelson, and the beautiful Heather Nixon talk about the ideas of liberty. Rock and roll.
What's in the news? The news you need to know from a libertarian perspective.
In unfit to exist news, the U.S. Department of Justice demanded files on anti-Trump activists that visited the website disruptj20.org, a website created to plan and announce actions intended to interrupt President Trump's inauguration. Inauguration Day protests in Washington, D.C. turned violent. 230 people were arrested and charged with felony rioting. In gathering evidence for the nearly 200 still open cases in D.C. court, the Justice Department issued a warrant that web host DreamHost says is so broad it would require handing over the logs of 1.3 million visits to the website. DreamHost called the warrant, quote, a highly untargeted demand that chills free association and the right of free speech afforded by the Constitution. This is, in our opinion, a strong example of investigatory overreach and a clear abuse of government authority, end quote. A week after the inauguration, DreamHost says the Justice Department asked it for records relating to the person who had registered the site, such as the person's physical and email addresses, and it complied. But in July, the government issued a new warrant that asked for additional materials, quote, all files, databases, and database records related to Disrupt J20's website, as prosecutors moved to seize all information involving the individuals who participated, planned, organized, or incited the January 20 riot. In its filing with the court, DreamHost says the warrant requires the company to, quote, turn over every piece of information it has about every visitor to a website expressing political views concerning the current administration, end quote. DreamHost also says, quote, "This information includes the IP addresses for the visitor, the web page visits viewed by the visitor, even a detailed description of software running in the visitor's computer." In essence, the search warrant not only aims to identify the political dissidents of the current administration, but attempts to identify and understand what content each of these dissidents viewed on the website. The search warrant also includes a demand that DreamHost disclose the content of all email inquiries and comments submitted from numerous private email accounts and prompted by the website, all through a single sweeping warrant, end quote. In this day and age, where internet service companies usually ask how high when the government says jump, this is refreshing to see. I used to use DreamHost for the Libertarian Party of Arkansas website a few years ago, and I was pleased with their service. This makes me really want to consider switching all of my sites back to them. This situation is exactly one of the reasons the United States declared independence from England. England would issue writs of assistance, or general standing warrants that gave British law enforcement officials wide powers to inspect the property and possessions of colonists in order to root out the proceeds of smuggling. This DreamHost case is about as close to a general warrant as we could see in our modern times. This would be akin to asking a library to give general information on every person who's visited the library to look at the books there. And not only an attack on the Fourth Amendment, this is also an attack on the First Amendment rights of the site owner and the people who visited. This is clearly about as unconstitutional as any warrant could be. But guess what? Just a few days ago, a District of Columbia Superior Court judge said the search could go ahead, though he would be, quote, supervising how the feds access the data. Police are now permitted to seize all of the requested information, all those 1.3 million bits of information, but will have to tell the judge how they will minimize access to data not pertinent to the investigation. DreamHost says they will continue to fight this disclosure, even with these silly restrictions that are about as easy to get around as they could be. The wording here reminds me of the Snowden revelations, when they tried to tell us that they didn't keep metadata on millions of Americans, but they had to take it all to get what they needed. I call bullshit again. The fact that the government will have in its hands this general data is scary enough, and we're supposed to rely on and trust a judge, a member of that government, to supervise the access to the data? That's just laughable. In more unfit-to-exist news, the governor of Oregon signed gun control legislation that would allow authorities to strip firearms from law-abiding citizens. This bill was supported by both Democrats and Republicans. The bill, signed by Governor Kate Brown, would permit state authorities to seize the firearms of anyone who has been detained as a threat to themselves or others without any judicial process at all. The intent is to reduce the number of gun-related suicides, which has been on the rise recently in the state. The legislation supposedly closes 2 loopholes in the state's gun laws. Currently, the state police have 3 days to figure out if a potential gun buyer has cleared a background check before the sale must go through. Now, that waiting period can extend indefinitely. Another section would ban firearm possession or allow confiscation from anyone who has been the subject of a restraining order filed by a significant other. Remember that anybody can get a restraining order against anyone else with little or no evidence of any wrongdoing on the part of the person being restrained. There is no conviction required, no evidence, and no presumption of innocence. And now, in Oregon, based on that alone, you can have your gun rights stripped from you. I wouldn't be surprised if some crazy person eventually uses this to get revenge, or even to harm someone. How hard would it be to make a case that you need a restraining order against someone that you want to harm or kill, have their weapons taken away, then have essentially carte blanche to kill that person, since they now have no way of defending themselves, disarmed by the government? This is dangerous legislation, to put it mildly. In investigating the investigators news, new charges have been filed against a former Secret Service agent who previously pled guilty to stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin during the U.S. government's Silk Road investigation. Shawn Bridges, who we've talked about on this show before, was sentenced to nearly 6 years in prison in late 2015 after pleading guilty to money laundering and wire fraud charges in relation to his theft of Bitcoin from Silk Road during his investigation into that case. The U.S. government revealed in subsequent court filings that it believed Bridges stole additional Silk Road funds using private keys he obtained during the investigation. According to new court documents filed yesterday, Bridges stole 1,606.6488 BTC, an amount worth roughly $6.5 million at current prices. At the time of the alleged theft in late July of 2015, just after he agreed to plead guilty, these holdings were worth around $470,000, given that Bitcoin was only trading at about $294 back then. If convicted, Bridges could receive as many as 10 years in prison, as well as a $250,000 fine. Remember, this jackass was one of the investigators in the case that gave Ross Ulbricht 3 life sentences for allegedly running the Silk Road website. The information was known at the time of the trial that Shawn Bridges had stolen a lot of funds during his investigation, but jurors were not allowed to know the level of corruption involved in this investigation because the judge refused to allow it to be heard during Ross's trial. It was an absolute kangaroo court. It makes you wonder how the jury would have voted had they known how corrupt this investigation and several investigators actually were. Guys, you know Tom Woods. You know his books. You know his podcast. Now learn what he learned to get where he is today in Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. Get the equivalent of a PhD in libertarian thought and free market economics online for just 24 cents a day while sitting at your computer or driving in your car. You can get it now at thelavaflow.com/woods. Listening to the audios and watching the videos will load you up with the facts, figures, and other ammunition that you need to feel supremely confident and come out on top when arguing politics or economics with yet another devoted socialist or neoconservative. But I repeat myself. Get a yearly membership to Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom for only $89 a year. Or like me, go for the Masterclass for lifetime access for only $497 and get tons of bonus material as well, including monthly live sessions with Liberty Classroom faculty and 435 audio-video lessons on government and history that Tom created specifically for the Ron Paul curriculum worth $250 alone. Make sure to sign up today at thelavaflow.com/woods to become a smarter and more informed libertarian than ever before. In What the Actual Fuck News, a British man with Down syndrome was prevented from having consensual sex with his wife, whom he married in 2010, until he received special training from the government on sex. Yeah, because that's who we need teaching anybody about sex. The program has been designed to train learning disabled men when it was appropriate or inappropriate to engage in sex. It should be noted that the man and his wife have been having consensual sex for years before this court order. The wife did not want to comply with the court order, so government officials informed her that if she did have sex with her husband, she would be committing a, quote, serious crime. I shit you not. After years of litigation and many a lonely night on the part of both the victim and his wife, justice has finally been served. A British court has awarded the man $13,000 in damages as a result of this insane court ruling that had made it a crime for a man's wife to have sex with him. So why didn't the man just take the court-ordered class so he could get it on with his wife again legally? Well, the course that the man needed to take to once again get government permission to have sex with his wife was delayed by over a year. So for over a year, the man had to endure this humiliation. His marriage must surely have suffered from the government's meddling into their bedroom affairs. And for all of that, after 1 year, after being profoundly affected and tormented, after putting the man's wife in the untenable position of choosing between being potentially taken away from her husband for good and going to prison, or depriving him of one of the essential expressions of human bonding between two consensual adults, the court saw fit to reward them with a meager $13,000. When you give the government the right to regulate anything, they will regulate everything. Remember this the next time you hear someone say there ought to be a law. In politically correct as incorrect news, ESPN decided to pull an Asian college football announcer named Robert Lee off the William & Mary at University of Virginia college football game because they were concerned that having a football announcer named Robert Lee would be offensive to some viewers, apparently because of Civil War General Robert E. Lee. Lee was switched to the Youngstown State at Pittsburgh game instead because there apparently aren't any statues to the football announcer in those areas of the country. ESPN said in a statement, quote, "We collectively made the decision with Robert to switch games as the tragic events in Charlottesville were unfolding, simply because of the coincidence of his name. In that moment, it felt right to all the parties. It's a shame that this is even a topic of conversation, and we regret that who calls play-by-play for a football game has become an issue," end quote. Now, this statement is utter and complete bullshit, folks. ESPN did this to try and show solidarity with the namby-pamby leftist snowflakes out there who contrive all sorts of things to be offended by so they can show that they're perpetual victims. But there's absolutely no indication that this was an issue at all before ESPN made this an issue. No one was calling for this change, not even the crazy left. No one made an issue out of this at all, except ESPN. They started the issue. They contrived it out of whole cloth so that they can show how sensitive they are to progressive, idiotic ideas. Instead, they were mocked, and they should be, for this decision. In Watch the Watchers news, cops attacked a man in a Detroit gas station, confiscated the store surveillance video, and lied about what happened. At least until cell phone video proving that they were lying came to light. DeMarco Kraft and Michael Johnson went into the gas station and spotted 2 Detroit police officers. Johnson saw a cop who'd been harassing him for over a year. According to Johnson, the cop started talking shit, so Johnson talked shit back. The cop, Richard Billingsley, then maced and grabbed Johnson and took him to the ground. Both the cop and the victim pretty much agree with this turn of events, but the cop says that Johnson was aggressive and came toward him with clenched fists when he sprayed Johnson. So that was that. The police took the security footage from the gas station, and there were never charges against the cop. That is, until cell phone footage was released to the news showing that, instead of walking towards the officer with clenched fists, Johnson had his back to the officer, was sprayed with mace on the back of the head, and grabbed by his neck while being thrown to the floor by the officer. Billingsley charged Johnson with aggravated or felonious assault. However, the Wayne County prosecutor returned the case, citing lack of information. Thank goodness. Johnson is filing suit against Billingsley and the city of Detroit in federal court for excessive use of force and violation of constitutional rights, as he should. And he's not the only one. Another man sued both Billingsley and his partner Patterson in federal court and is also claiming excessive force in an entirely different case. Sure, Jackson got mouthy with Billingsley, but that was only after they tried to intimidate him and his friend for simply walking into a store. And last time I checked, getting mouthy isn't against the law yet. There was no justification for the subsequent violence, as it was nothing short of a cop losing his temper and abusing his badge to dole out some street justice. In some good news, the Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled that digital cameras can't be searched without a warrant. In this case, the search of a robbery suspect's backpack while he was being questioned yielded a ring, a digital camera, and other items. The police warrantlessly searched the digital phone, discovered a photo of the suspect next to a firearm that was later determined to be stolen. This led to 2 convictions, one for the stolen property and one for carrying a firearm without a license. The defendant challenged all of the evidence resulting from the warrantless search of the backpack, but the state got to keep most of what it found, along with a conviction for theft. But it didn't get to keep the firearm conviction. As the court here sees digital cameras to be almost no different than cell phones when it comes to warrantless searches. As the court points out, there's nothing in the law that allows officers to warrantlessly search something if that something poses no risk to officer safety or the preservation of evidence. Searching the backpack could be considered fine, because it may have contained a weapon. I can see that. But searching the camera isn't, because a camera isn't a weapon, and the possibility of evidence destruction is even lower in a device with limited or zero network connectivity. The court also finds digital cameras to be just as filled with private information as cell phones, at least in terms of opening them up to search warrant exceptions. Cell phones contain far more personal information to be sure, but that doesn't make digital cameras any less of a privacy concern. This ruling is, of course, limited to just Massachusetts, but I expect many more courts will find similarly in future cases when it comes to other electronic devices other than phones. Exercise your free market muscles by going to thelavaflow.com/support and giving a per episode donation of as little as $1 an episode, or use Bitcoin. Get exclusive content, rewards, and help the Lava Flow become fiscally neutral while providing you more content. thelavaflow.com/support.
It's time to shake up your podcast feed, folks, by subscribing to Lions of Liberty, the only libertarian variety show out there. Spend Mondays with me, Mark Claire, as I feature in-depth interviews with great names in the libertarian community and fun roundtable discussions.
Electric Liberty Land with me, Brian McWilliams, every Wednesday, your weekly dose of comedy, culture, and liberty.
And Felony Fridays with me, John Odermatt, where I expose injustice in the broken criminal justice system.
Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and at lionsofliberty.com.
This is Chris Spangle, and I am the host of We Are Libertarians, which you can find in iTunes, Google Play, or at wearelibertarians.com. We are a podcast that brings you all of the irreverence that modern politics deserves by examining current events from a libertarian perspective. So please, Check us out at wearelibertarians.com.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom.
Schools now feel that they have a mandate to tell you what they're truly for, and it's not education. It's about conformity and compliance, molding good citizens. At Deer Park Elementary School in Pasco County, Florida, signs appeared last week showing a hierarchy of behaviors from good to bad. Democracy was at the top. Anarchy was at the bottom. While there are many issues with these posters, beginning with the fact that public schooling is far from democratic, the one causing the most outrage among parents is the desire for children to exhibit, quote, cooperation and conformity. The posters tied to the school's, quote, Behavior and Classroom Culture project, modeled after author Marvin Marshall's Raise Responsibility system of discipline, suggested that a young person who complies and conforms is a model student. Under relentless pressure from parents and student advocacy organizations, the school indicated that they would temporarily remove the posters until they could better communicate their initiative to parents and the public. As the Freedom for Economic Education said, quote, these school posters explicitly reveal the troubling reality that mass schooling retains its 19th century roots as a system of social control. Originally designed to bring order to an increasingly diverse population, the industrial model of mass schooling continues to impose order by encouraging compliance, rewarding conformity, and eliminating individuality. As author and academic Noam Chomsky said best, quote, the education system is supposed to train people to be obedient, conformist, not think too much, do what you're told, stay passive. In educator John Holt's best-selling book, How Children Learn, republished this month in honor of its 50th anniversary, Holt writes about the systematic ways schooling destroys children's natural curiosity and originality. Quote, we like to say that we send children to school to teach them to think. What we do all too often is teach them to think badly, to give up a natural and powerful way of thinking in favor of a method that does not work well for them and that we rarely use ourselves. Worse than that, we convince most of them that, at least in a school setting or any situation where words or symbols or abstract thought are concerned, they can't think at all, end quote. In the anarchy section of the poster, it says that anarchy is the absence of order and that it is aimless and chaotic. What the actual fuck? I mean, that's complete and utter nonsense. Anarchy is one thing. It means without rulers. It doesn't mean without laws or without order. It just means some jackass isn't ruling your life. Nothing more. In contrast, the democracy portion of the poster says, quote, develops self-discipline, demonstrates initiative, displays responsibility. Now that's horseshit. Democracy takes away initiative, and it takes away responsibility, because you're nothing more than a cog in a wheel, a single vote where you can cast responsibility on others. The worst of all is the section on cooperation and conformity where it says, and I shit you not, quote, considerate, complies, conforms to peer pressure. Are they seriously making the case that cooperation is conforming to peer pressure? Fuck that noise. Jacqueline Warner, a parent of a student at the school, said, quote, this is going to become an embarrassing problem for the entire Pasco County school system. No child should essentially be bullied and labeled by the very people who are supposed to help build them up. How can you teach a child to conform to peer pressure? This goes against everything that we strive to teach our children at home. Breaking laws in classrooms, being labeled an anarchist, until my son burns the flag while in class, he sure as hell is not an anarchist. Maybe she should tell that to all the communist authoritarians who burn flags because this country doesn't have a government that gives us everything. This just goes to show that the average person has no clue what anarchy is, sadly. And we certainly can't expect the current education system to explain it properly. This is what the education system in our country has become: conformity and compliance. No thank you. This is why I beg you to get your kids out of government indoctrination centers. If you truly want a libertarian society someday, public school is one of the worst things possible, teaching the next generation that they must conform and comply. Thank you for listening to the show this week. As always, I need to thank my favorite dinner date, Jessica, for her help with the show. For the show notes to this episode, where I put links and other information that's been on the show, go to thelavaflow.com/69. I have 4 new iTunes reviews this week. Tallkid84 said, "Real news centered on people. You are the only one who goes after incompetent, dirty cops with a real furor. Police have an inordinate amount of power over everyday people, and when they screw up, they are practically never held to the same standard as the rest of us. Thank you for what you do." Absolutely, kid. Thank you. You know that I'm all about holding bad cops accountable. Period. Gary had this to say. "Great show. I had come across Roger Paxton via the Lions of Liberty podcast, Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor, but I'd actually not checked out Lava Flow until the July 4th, 2017 episode. Wow, what a message that Roger is spreading to those who identify as libertarians, or even just those who are wary of what the state is becoming, or already has become. Thanks, Gary. I'm glad you enjoy Lions of Liberty. I had so much fun on that episode." CKC070911121 said, "What the actual fuck? I love hearing Roger Paxton's raspy voice talking about the most interesting items for today's anarchists and libertarians. If you were looking for the best liberty, freedom, and anarchy podcast out there, stop now. You have found the Lava Flow." The best out there? Wow, CK. Thanks, man. I mean, that's awesome. I appreciate that. And finally, Master Builder 357 had this to say. "The Lava Flow podcast is quite possibly the best podcast that you aren't listening to. Roger Paxton, creator of the Lava Flow podcast, consistently delivers clear, concise, libertarian perspectives on topical current events as they relate to freedom, liberty, and the economy. Paxton has a unique proclivity for delivering this perspective eloquently, with pristine clarity of thought while hammering home the importance of holding our government accountable for the various forms of mismanagement that have perpetrated our fall from greatness. The content that you will encounter on this delightfully informative podcast will possibly open your mind to think about issues critically from angles that you may have never considered before. If you're interested in broadening your understanding of libertarian principles, I strongly urge you to add the Lava Flow to your library. I am confident that it will quickly become your libertarian podcast of choice. Liberty up with the Lava Flow." Holy shit, Master Builder. That is an awesome review. I don't even know what to say. Thanks so much for that, man. Remember, guys, iTunes helps to steer people to this podcast based on ratings and reviews. So please go to thelavaflow.com/iTunes today and leave me a rating and a review. All the cool kids are doing it, like these guys. Thank you to everybody who's left me a rating and a review so far. You guys are the best. To all of you who haven't, can you guys please help me out and go leave a review for me? Go to thelavaflow.com/iTunes to do that now. After a huge 5 new supporters last week, I followed that up with this episode with 4 new supporters, plus 1 previous supporter increasing their support. David and Jim both began pledges to support this show using Patreon at the $2.50 per episode level. Guys, that is awesome. Thank you so much. I also received a $3 per episode pledge from Brianna. Brianna, that's amazing. Thank you. And Vignesh increased his pledge from $2 per episode to $5 per episode. Thanks, Vignesh. And finally, I'm just stunned. I have a huge thanks to Ryan from Gunfighter Tactical, who now holds the record of the largest pledge of support to the Lava Flow to date. Ryan has pledged $40 per episode. What the actual fuck? Are you kidding me? That's so fucking amazing, and I just can't get over it. So I had to check out what Gunfighter Tactical does, and let me tell you about it. It's really cool. They're a privately owned gun shop in San Diego, California, and they struggle every day, just like all of us do, against deranged government bullies who pile on senseless laws and regulations in a shameless attempt to regulate the gun industry into extinction. If you're a gun owner, you know what they're talking about. They stand by their libertarian principles 100%, and they insist on their freedom in spite of this relentless assault. Now get this. This is where it gets cool. The store, they refuse to sell anything to the government, law enforcement at any level, that the government would imprison them for selling to non-government employees. So if Joe Blow can't buy it, the government can't buy it. I love that. How badass is that? These guys really want the government to feel how onerous the laws they make are for us, so they force those same laws on the government. I love this shit. This probably costs them a lot of business. So if you're in the San Diego area, please drop by and check them out, because these guys go out of their way to show that they believe in liberty. They also do their best to educate customers on how to follow California's ridiculously Orwellian gun laws, or at least how not to get caught while breaking them. Definitely go check out Gunfighter Tactical at gunfightertactical.com or on Facebook. So thanks to these 5 Liberty lovers and all of the rest of my awesome supporters, I am now at $226 per episode, or 90.4% of the way towards my next goal of $250. Holy shit, I'm getting close now. When I hit this next goal, I'm going to be bringing you a full episode of The Lava Flow every single week instead of the current every other week. I know that you want more content from me, and I want to give it to you. So make sure to add your pledge today to help me bring you twice the Lava Flow that you're getting today. If you, like David, Jim, Brianna, Vignesh, and Ryan, want more of the Lava Flow, go now and exercise your free market muscles at thelavaflow.com/support. And give a per-episode donation of as little as $1 an episode using Federal Reserve notes through Patreon or Bitcoin through Coinbase. I even take Dash and Ethereum now. I want to be able to bring you more content very soon, so please make sure to add your donation today to help make that happen. I'm so close, guys. Until next time, keep striking the roots.
Thank you for listening to The Lava Flow at thelavaflow.com. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe now at thelavaflow.com/subscribe. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.